Joining us live from the Weather Center with some answers. Ramisha.
Well, we still have a fairly high risk for severe storms and for flooding. We've got multiple threats, multiple hazards going on across the area, so let's get right to it. Our radar is picking up wind gusts over 90 miles per hour, 94 mile per hour wind gusts, 66 mile per hour wind gusts. So this is certainly a very dangerous situation. This is going to be right around Spring Valley and the Houston Heights area. The derecho that hit Houston on May 16, 2024 caused significant damage in and around H-Town. But it wasn't just the Houston area that picked up a lot of damage from this. Typically with a derecho, you have 400 plus miles of damage from that widespread wind, and that wind is usually producing numerous gusts around 75 plus miles per hour. But I want to talk about what this derecho did. It started off around the East Texas area. Of course, it roared through Houston, caused massive amounts of damage, but it traveled close to a whopping 900 miles before it decided, okay, I've done enough. So it went actually from East Texas all the way through Louisiana, southern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and all the way over to Orlando, Florida, still producing these damaging wind gusts. The derecho event back on May 16, 2024 produced 80 to 100 mile per hour winds that rolled right over downtown Houston, and some of that damaging wind also made its way into Baytown. It wasn't just straight line winds. Occasionally with this bow echo or line of severe storms, you can get brief tornadoes, and we actually had 3 brief tornadoes to touch down that afternoon as well. 2 around the Cypress area with 110 mile per hour winds, and 1 in Waller County, an EF1 with 100 mile per hour winds. So all 3 of those tornadoes, of course, produced additional damage outside of the derecho. Before the derecho had occurred, the National Weather Service had recently come out with new ways to issue severe thunderstorm warnings. They actually broke it down into categories. So this was actually the first time that the severe thunderstorm warning with the destructive terminology was used for the Houston area. That basically means the meteorologists at the National Weather Service thought there was a high probability that there would be destructive 80 mile per hour winds, or maybe even stronger, within this line of severe storms. That is exactly what rolled across the Houston area. In fact, it ended up being even worse. 80 to 90 to even 100 mile per hour winds were estimated with that derecho as it rolled across Houston. Now, what did that look like? It was a super scary event for those that were caught out there in the derecho, and it certainly looked very scary on radar as well. It looked even scarier in person. After the derecho moved out, it was definitely obvious that a lot of damage was done in and around downtown Houston. In fact, hundreds of windows had the glass blown out of them in and around downtown Houston and a lot of those high-rise buildings. So there were basically shards of glass all over several streets, and many of those streets ended up being closed for at least a week so that glass could be cleaned up and things could get back to normal. So it was a horrible situation. Also, there were a lot of people working in those buildings. So imagine being in there and all of a sudden the strong wind starts to hit your building and the windows are just blown out and glass is being thrown everywhere. Super scary situation and also very dangerous. That's why we tell you, when these severe storms, even with or without a tornado strike, you need to make sure to try to get to the lowest level of the building that you're located in. Stay away from those windows and definitely stay away from those outside walls, and try to protect yourself, especially your head, from that flying debris. Now, that's not the only issue this derecho caused. It ended up causing about $1.2 billion in damage. And another thing that was super critical with this, a ton of people in and around H-Town were without power, not just for one day, but for several days. In fact, I was one of those people without power for about 3 days. Some of the hardest hit areas, of course, were downtown Houston and the Heights area in Houston. Several people were without power. We had a lot of damage done to the power infrastructure. And of course, there were several power poles that were just twisted, completely destroyed. So it was a huge impact. And of course, definitely, unfortunately, we had several fatalities with this event. So this was certainly one for the history books. This was a super dangerous derecho, and hopefully we won't have to deal with this anytime soon again around the Houston area.